So Andrea, the customer side of the business model canvas is really built around value and what people are willing to pay for. This side of the business model canvas is really about efficiency. And let's start with key activities, all the things that a business needs to do to support the customer side of the canvas.
So the thinking here that I think is really important for a business leader is that you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. You absolutely have to decide that you make choices. And for key activities, you could certainly do 100 things. But if you know that 10 of them are the most important things to the customer segments and to support the value proposition, for example, you could have a call center that literally does everything perfectly. Mm-hmm. And it would put you out of business really quickly because you could never afford to support that. So what are the 10 things that you should be doing absolutely perfectly, not because you can, but because your customer segments value it the most? And that's how you can start, instead of making everything efficient all at once or providing everything to everybody, you make choices about which 10 or so things you're going to really focus on as key activities, and then do them really great and do them in a way that that resonates with your customers.
Yeah, and it seems to me that this is that operational efficiency, that when a company wants to focus on this as a strategic competitive advantage, you've got to be better at the things that you do choose to do than anybody else. You've got to be able to do them more efficiently, effectively, and profitably than anyone else out there.
Or know why you're not. So for instance, with the example we used earlier, Zappos, mm-hmm. they chose not to do what some call centers do, which is to reward people for getting you off the phone quickly. Mm-hmm. They decided to reward you on how happy you had the customer feel after the transaction. Two totally different things. So the metrics that you have with your key activities really matter, because if you're rewarding somebody for getting someone off the phone quickly, you're going to get a lot of customers upset if you're Zappos and they expect you to listen to them talk about their pizza order.
Exactly. And on the flip side, Zappos in Kentucky is this really ultra-efficient distribution center that literally can get orders out sometimes the same day that they're ordered and have them delivered the next day.
That's right, because they know that that's valuable.
Yes. So now key resources. As you were mentioning, most companies, in fact, I would say all companies, have limited resources or at least scarce resources, and particularly as we relate to capital, people, and time.
Right.
So it's really about allocating those resources, and what I'm hearing you say is that should be directly aligned with our value proposition and our channels and our customer relationships, only adding what people really value.
I think that there's a couple things here. People don't think that it's sexy to talk about key resources. It's just not the part of the equation that gets a lot of sex appeal. And yet, if you think about it and you really invest well in things that matter the most, the resources themselves can speak a lot about what matters to you as a company. It can be as much as investment that you make in capital expenditures. It can be the way that you, like Google prides itself on having this, workforce that has snacks whenever they want it and can mm-hmm. ride tricycles, I see from the movie The Intern. but the idea is, where do you get the reward for the culture that you want to communicate through the way that you expend resources?
Interesting. Now, key partners. A big part of the canvas is devoted to that, and I think it's one of those things that oftentimes gets overlooked, particularly in smaller companies, is who should we be working with to help deliver this value proposition in a bigger way?
So a word that's tossed around when it comes to key partners, I think, is actually apt, which is ecosystem. It used to be, in the old days, when we didn't have this much transparency in the market, we were competing with people and everything was a big secret. Well, nothing's a secret now. So this notion of partners is that you have co-opetition, you have co-creation, you have all these new ways of interacting with people in the, quote, ecosystem, so that, say that you're a provider of insurance, and you have insurance agents, and you have end customers. Well, now if you put something like eSurance in the middle, you've changed that dynamic with your agents that you used to have.
Right.
So it might be that your partners are also people who are going to have a sense of competition with you sometimes. Mm-hmm. Online sales have done that with a lot of the players. Whatever you're selling, if you're selling it in the big box, you're selling it in a boutique. If you're a service provider, there's probably a really big aggregator that can come in and offer it as well. So a lot of times the way to look at your partners is, who do your customers think would be in the same sort of world that you're in? And then in the supply chain, what we used to call supply chain, who are the people there who might sometimes be part of the handoff of what you do, but sometimes, as I said, be cooperating with you and maybe even co-creating the next product line with you, maybe even an acquisition down the road.
Yeah, great point. And then we have the cost structure as the base of this side of the efficiency part of the canvas. And I'm thinking here how important it is to identify those items that we're willing to invest in, rather than just thinking about them as our biggest expense. Think of that as an investment. A lot of times we hear our biggest cost is people in our organization. Rather than thinking about it as, about that as a huge investment you're making in people. Now, how do we leverage that? How do we get the most out of people? How do we make sure they're aligned and engaged?
Right, and if you think about it, the engagement of the people in your business might be your only differentiator, because everything else can be commoditized pretty quickly. So what kind of culture, and that used to be considered a soft skill, the people, the culture, the talent, but investing in the right people and keeping them up to speed and keeping them in a way where they're contributing to the innovation in your company can be a very important part of your whole cost structure investment.
Another way to think about cost structure is, should we be expending that as an expense at all? I know that outsourcing has gotten a bad name over the last few years, but when we think about it is, should we really be bringing someone in whose expertise, whose business model is, for example, printing, rather than trying to run printing in our own shop or trying to do it part-time around our own company?
That's right, and a lot of times as technology advances with things like 3D printers or places who can do fabrication in smaller batches, sometimes just renting that service from someone else is much better than investing in an asset that we have to own and depreciate over a number of years like in the old models.
It's really interesting how this 9 segmented canvas really gives us a full view of the organization as it stands today.
Absolutely.